Good morning. Glad to have you with us on this Tuesday on 104.5 The Zone. Hope you guys aren't dragging this morning because you stayed up to watch the national championship game. Maybe you were smart and you went to bed at halftime when UConn had a 12-point lead but felt as though it was in full control. Although San Diego State, they did make it fun for a little bit in the second half. Lucas Panzica with you. Buck Rising feeling a little under the weather today. So I've partnered up with Rhett Bryant of Titans Radio for the next 3 hours. Robert Walsh is on the other side of the glass. Good morning, fellas.
Hello.
Hello.
I thought you were going to say something. Why you got to do that?
Why do I have to do what?
You got to pull me in and you make eye contact with me like you're going to say something, and then you wait, you give it a beat, and then you just give me a dead fish hello.
Well, you've heard his top of the hour updates. There's the pregnant pause with on 104.5 The Zone.
Silence is golden, man. That's how you get your attention. That's how you.
Not when we're doing this.
Now you're.
It sets off silence alarms, and next thing you know, the boss is coming.
It could literally cost us money.
No, I think, guys, bear with me here. I think we should give it a shot where we just don't say anything, and people wait on every word we're going to say.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, that's not a good plan, Robert. You're a smart guy. Be smarter than that. That's not how we do this.
Okay, let me. I'm going to go back to the drawing board. I'll come back with a better idea, and you guys do the show in the meantime.
All right, visual bit on an audio medium. Raise your hand if you stayed up and you were watching the television when the clock hit zeros on the national championship game last night.
I was up, but I was not watching the end of the national championship game. I got to be honest.
You were not watching. UConn wins their fifth title, 76-59 over San Diego State. A disappointing game as far as how competitive it was, but not shocking. UConn has been the most dominant team in this tournament. Nobody expected San Diego State to be in this spot. So the Huskies finished the season 31-8 as a 4 seed and win their fifth national championship. So the conversation going into yesterday was, what would a win mean for UConn as a program in the grand scheme of things in college basketball? Because I think the exercise of, is UConn a blue blood, is it not a blue blood, I think that's over, right? Can't win 5 national titles and not be in that sphere. But now the question is, where do you stack up UConn with the likes of a Kansas or a Duke or a North Carolina? Robert's a North Carolina native. Maybe he could speak to this a little bit. But when you think about UConn in the historical context of college basketball, Rhett, how do you view them taking into account what happened last night on one of the most dominant runs to a national title in a singular NCAA tournament that we've seen in the modern era?
Well, first of all, I think we know what Robert will say because he can give us perspective from Tobacco Road. But when you think about the body of work, and I know what Robert's going to say in terms of hits and misses in making it into the tournament or getting bounced out, but when you start thinking, and people, unless you're around that program or on that campus, you forget that they've won 5 national championships in 24 years under 3 different head coaches. There's got to be some kind of accreditation just for that alone. Now, Coach K is no longer at Duke, and we'll see how all that plays out, but we know about his storied history there and multiple national championships. But I think UConn deserves some consideration in this. Is it Gino Ariema and the Lady Huskies of not so long ago? No, but it's over a window of time. I mean, you get 5 natties in 24 years under 3 different head coaches. Says something to me.
Yeah, in that short of a span, it's insane. Because North Carolina has been there, but over eras, right? Dean Smith to Roy Williams to now Hubie. Kentucky, Adolph Rupp and Tubby Smith and John Calipari.
Jim Boeheim at Syracuse.
Right.
You know, I'm just thinking about under one head coach.
Yes. Yeah, but, so that's what I'm saying. There's the programs that have achieved that under multiple head coaches are so few and far between. And the ones that are, you're talking about a span of generations, over a span of 50, 60 years. And UConn has done it in less than 3 decades.
So I would agree that UConn is probably, I would consider them a blue blood. Now, I would put them in that category, that many championships over that period of time. But I would also have to talk about the other side. So over the last 24 years, they've won 5 national championships. Over that same amount of time period, they've missed the tournament 8 times. So 1/3 of those years, they did not even go to the 64-team tournament. Over that same period of time, Duke has missed the tournament just once. So I think there's something to be said about that, but it's just their peaks and valleys, right? Their highs are very high and their lows are very low. Take that for what you want it to mean.
Well, to your point, Robert, and I set it up a minute ago, time will tell, because what does Duke's success look like post-Coach K? If they start missing tournaments left and right, I think the answer to this question becomes more into focus of them being a blue blood. Now, obviously, in that window of time that carries on, we'll have to see how competitive they are and if they win another one. But I think fresh off the heels of the retirement of Coach Mike Krzyzewski, I think that's one of the reasons why, for some, this is not a clear-cut answer.
Great performance last night from UConn. So disruptive to what San Diego State was trying to do. They just forced the Aztecs to look so disjointed at so many points throughout that game, holding San Diego State to 32% from the floor, 6 of 23 from beyond the arc. UConn shoots 43% from the floor, only 6 of 17 from three-point range. They didn't light it up, but they were timely threes. And there was no question on who was the better team in that game and who the best team in this tournament. I mean, every game won by double digits is crazy, from the round of 64 all the way through to the national title. And now that is 5 national championships for UConn, more than Kansas, the exact same amount as Duke. Now, when you start to get into the numbers of how many times the teams have been to the national title game, Duke has been there 11 times, so they're 5 and 6. UConn's been there 5, and they won all 5. That might be the most remarkable stat of them all, that UConn has made the Final Four 6 times. 5 of those, they've won the national championship. Duke's made the Final Four 17 times, which is an insane number, and has won the same amount of national championships. So the rate at which UConn is winning when they get there is unreal.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Again, under 3 different coaching regimes.
Under Jim Calhoun, Kevin Ollie, and now Dan Hurley. But you're right, Robert, in that UConn just appears to fall off and then build back up. They just disappear for a while, when the likes of the Dukes and UNCs of the world don't tend to do that.
And if we're going to make fun of them, like, what else are they good at? Their football program was putrid for years.
They had the one little spike with
sure.
Who was the coach that got them to the BCS Bowl? This was in my head the other day. I can't. Oh God. And Randy Edsall.
There you go.
Yeah.
Big brain on this guy. What else are they good at? The only thing dumber than that is Buck saying yesterday that Huskies do not howl.
Yeah, that was pretty dumb.
I'm going to have to add that to the list.
Pretty dumb.
Wait a minute. Whoa. He said what?
We were ending the show, and I went, "Ow!" for the Huskies, and he said, Huskies, they don't do that. They don't howl.
Buck, where do you live? Under a rock? Have a fire truck or an ambulance go by with a pin full of Huskies and see what happens.
Yeah, you're going to talk to the guy that was called Husky throughout elementary school, middle school. You think I don't know what they do?
Yeah, I've had Husky in half sizes in children's clothes. I mean, come on.
I'm a pretty big fella.
Josh on YouTube, where you can hang out with us, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, 104.5 The Zone TV, says, if you add both men's and women's, they are the best ever. There's no question about that, right? UConn, the best combined men's and women's college basketball program.
Yeah.
I
don't
think that's necessarily close. Trippin' Titans asks, where is Buck? I poisoned him. No, Buck is sick. He's not feeling great today. Hopefully Buck feels better, and we'll get him back later on this week. But we've got a great show today. Bruce Feldman's going to join us in hour 3. He had a very interesting mock draft regarding what the Titans are going to do in the first round specifically. But before we get to Bruce at 12:20, let's dive in to these rumors on the Titans moving up to that number 3 overall pick. Because, Rhett, we haven't gotten a chance to talk to you about this quite yet. So curious to get your input on not only your thoughts on the potential of the Titans moving up to number 3, who that would be for, but what it would take to get there. And we'll do that coming up next. It's the Buck Rising Show on 104.5 The Zone.
Years ago, we opened our doors with one mission in mind.
We'll be right back with the top 10 songs of 1983.
To sell quality American-made vehicles at a fair price.
You have arrived.
and we've loved every minute of the ride. Celebrating 40 years of Two Rivers Ford.
Welcome back. Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan with you on 104.5 The Zone. Robert Walsh spinning things back there across the glass. We have coaxed Rhett out of his draft cave because it is officially draft month, I believe, 25 days.
Yeah, it'd be 3 weeks from Thursday night.
And that first name will be called. So, as my phone is deciding to go crazy. You like that?
We would make fun of Buck relentlessly.
I roast Buck for doing that type of thing. Where is Titans Radio at this point in the draft preparation process?
So we have a spot carved out that will be revealed later this week for live pick-by-pick coverage in the public. It'll be fun. Ramon Foster will join us again on Thursday night for pick-by-pick coverage of round one. We have a new analyst that's going to join us in night two that I'm excited about. And this guy is well-known and knows his college football players. We thought it would be good to bring in someone who knows college football players very well, and especially SEC players. Brent Hubbs of the Vol Network will join us on Friday night, as there will be lots of SEC players taken in rounds 2 and 3.
I love that.
So it'll be that'll be fun. So in terms of the preparation, Coach Mack and I have got probably our top 125, 150 prospects. That'll be just enough to cover more than what we would do in pick-by-pick coverage. And then I'm doing live updates top and bottom of the hour on that Saturday, the 29th, from 10 till 4 to cover most of rounds 4 through 7. But we're just about to the point where we have a pretty good idea of how it's set vertically, and we're about to set it up horizontally and put players in pods, just like you would in the war room, in terms of having your game plan ready. What Rand Carthon is doing right now is, he'll in his first pod, he'll have, and it could be all different positions, but you'll pod them out by position, and you'll look at the best player that's in that pod when it comes up to your pick. And as players come off the board, you thin that out, and you continue to look at the best available players in the pod, if that's, your line of thinking. But anyway, that's kind of where we are. And I'm continuing to do vetting and background on these guys, checking all medical red flags, anything, off the field that might have been a thing. And there's not a ton of those in the draft this year, but and interesting stories. Like that B.J. Ojolari is the grandson of a Nigerian prince. And of course, I knew this from when his brother Aziz Ojolari was drafted by the Giants a couple of years ago. But, there's just interesting stories like that. And because some of these guys had some incredible stories about how they got to this point, whether it's they went through 3 different community colleges, or transfer portal has been a huge part of this, because you're going to see a lot of draftees that are 25-year-old rookies, like Hendon Hooker, who got that extra year of eligibility, and some of which, if they stayed at the same program, I've got some guys that played 50 and sometimes 60 games in college. So a lot of older rookies in this, and, that's the dichotomy between the quarterback conversation, is you have Hendon Hooker at 25 as a rookie versus Anthony Richardson from Florida, who's 20. Right. I mean, he's just a kid. So, and there's a huge maturation scale that you can use between 20 and 25 years old. I still did a lot of things dumb at 25, but not as much as I did when I was 20.
That conversation fascinates me. The age conversation throughout the draft process. It feels like it gets talked about more for quarterbacks than anybody else, as far as guys that are closer to being a finished product than others. You mentioned Hendon Hooker. He's 25. He will be 25 in the fall. Turns 26 in January. Will Levis is 23. He will be 24 in the fall. Mm-hmm. So just a year back of Hendon Hooker as far as age goes. And then Anthony Richardson, that, like you said, can't even buy a beer legally at this point. But at what position is it not as much of a concern? You know what I mean? Like, at what position do you look at a guy that's been in college and played 50, 60 games, and you said, okay, I like that this guy has all these games under his belt coming into the league as a grown man at 25, 26 in some cases.
Well, you'd look at quarterback to be one of those that would be acceptable, because it's not as big a deal to me, because think about this, and we're going to talk about this, I know, with Hendon Hooker, but Hendon Hooker if he plays 10 years and has a great career, that's still 35, 36 years old. And look at what we have seen with some of these guys that played into their, late 30s, early 40s. So that doesn't bother me. Now, where somebody like Anthony Richardson has a leg up is by the time he turns 25, he will have worked through his rookie contract, and if things have gone well, he's going to get paid.
Yeah. And most of his development will have come at the highest level.
Yeah, and it's kind of where Lamar Jackson is right now at 26 years old, right? So I think the place where you would be more hesitant, obviously, is a place where there's a lot of wear and tear. At the running back position, you would, he may have this guy may have, everything you want, but if he's 25, maybe you don't draft him quite as high because 30 is the, father time chimes on this thing in terms of, the tipping point where you start to lose production value unless he's just an elite back that is the anomaly, the outlier.
I'm with you on that. Buck and I have gone back and forth on this a lot because he has cited Hendon Hooker's age as not a problem area or a big cause for concern, but a factor against drafting a Hendon Hooker and why he's not being talked about as a top 5 pick as much as the top 4 that have completely headlined the quarterback draft here in 2023. And I struggle with that. I understand the difference between a 20-year-old and a 25-year-old and what you can do as far as development goes, that there's certainly more room to grow there for an Anthony Richardson. Mm-hmm. But I just wonder how much that concerns scouts and coaches and general managers. And maybe it differs. Maybe there's some guys that is a big point of emphasis for them.
I think it depends on who you ask. Listen, first thing, Hendon Hooker, I would not hesitate to draft if I'm a head coach and general manager of a team because I know I'm getting a leader. I mean, that guy goes in and commands the huddle. I mean, 25, that's a grown man. And not to say that 20 isn't, but I see how he carries himself. I saw how he carried himself at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, how he carried himself at the Combine. He's engaged. He's going to be a good teammate, and he is going to be a field general in the grand scheme of things, just because of the position he plays. And listen, Daniel Jeremiah is one that has said it recently, and I agree totally. He's the 5th quarterback that's going to be taken in this draft after the first 4, whoever clamors for what. And I know we're going to get into this, but I think there's a chance that Hendon Hooker ends up being a first-round pick. I really do, just because the quarterback draft is so much different from the rest of the positions.
Speaking of the first round, the conversation yesterday dominated by Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network, what he said on his Move the Sticks podcast with Bucky Brooks, Rhett, that he is hearing buzz about the Titans sniffing around the Cardinals' number 3 overall pick. Now, everything we say in this regard about potential trade scenarios in the draft has to be taken with a grain of salt, right? Because I'm sure the Arizona Cardinals would love for people to think that as many teams as possible are gunning for that number 3 overall pick. Because if I'm the Arizona Cardinals, there's no way I want to pick at number 3 overall when you consider the QB-hungry teams that are there sitting behind you. But what did you make of this? Your reaction when you hear from Daniel Jeremiah that, hey, Titans are they're poking around.
First of all, and if you haven't listened to the Move the Sticks podcast, it's Daniel Jeremiah is one of my favorites. He is connected. So that's the first thing that it puts my radar up because Daniel Jeremiah's done it. He was a scout. So he's had a mortgage riding on it. And I trust his evaluation. And, look, there's differences of opinion because, people have differences of opinion about everything, but certainly in that world. But when he tells you that the team that I hear that you shouldn't sleep on to move up to 3 is numero 11, as he's quoting, the Tennessee Titans, you hear Bucky Brooks, he's like, whoa, okay. But the thing is, he's connected and talks to those folks in circles. He knows a lot of those folks. And now, you said it right. He prefaced it by saying they're exploring the opportunity. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it certainly gets your attention because this isn't Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk just throwing something against the wall. This is Daniel Jeremiah, who's, again, connected to these folks in circles. Monty Ossenfort, if you hear the opinions around the league and around the national folks that cover the NFL, they think he almost has to deal out of this pick.
Has to.
And it makes, first of all, he'd be silly not to. And you're going to get yourself more house money if you do, because there are people that are going to move up to this spot to get one of these quarterbacks. In fact, it could be so much of a frenzy, we could see it go 1, 2, 3, 4 if things, set themselves up in the right way. So you can naturally draw a line there because Monty Ossenfort was the director of player personnel under John Robinson here, so they know him. Coach Vrabel knows him. And I'm sure Rand Carthon does to a degree because, again, circles, right? So it depends on how it shakes out. I have felt like since the day that the Carolina Panthers moved up from 9 to number 1, I felt like that is to get C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, because I think he's the most sure bet out of the 4. Bryce Young is who you want, but your head in your heart, but in your head says, I'm worried about the durability part of it because he is a smaller framed guy. Whereas C.J. Stroud is the prototypical more size, 6'3", 6'3.5", 213, whatever it is, and put on a clinic at the combine and then followed up with a nice pro day. So you figure if it is those two in whatever order, Carolina and Indy, then if the Titans were to move to 3, you're moving to get a quarterback. You're not moving up to get Tyree Wilson from, Texas Tech as a pass rusher. You're moving up to get a quarterback because it takes, even from 11, so much capital to be able to do that. And so that remains to be seen. Do the Colts and Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay, do they throw a wrench into the deal and they want Will Levis? Well, then that means you've got your choice of either or Stroud or Bryce Young at that point. I think it'll be Stroud and Young in whatever order in those first 2. So that leaves Levis and that leaves Anthony Richardson from Florida. I lean towards this theory of it being Anthony Richardson because, again, you naturally want to draw a line from a Florida product in General Manager Rand Carthon to a Florida product there. But it brings on more talk when you just throw that out as a guess because, again, the age at 20, a limited 1-year showing, and there are many who believe that he would be best suited being drafted by someone like the Seattle Seahawks at 5, where he can learn under Geno Smith for a year and keep going. But conventional wisdom tells you take a quarterback that high, you're going to throw him into the frying pan at some point. So, when I hear that there's a possibility that they can move up to 3, it could be Levis, but I think it could be Anthony Richardson because when you look at the tail of the tape, and he put on a nice showing at the combine and then followed it up with a great pro day. And again, that is a lot of times against air, no defenders, nobody in his face. But when you think about the possibilities, with however long Derrick Henry has left here, you could have a hell of an RPO with those 2. And with an RPO like that, your offensive line does not have to be the best. It's kind of like the same scenario with a Lamar Jackson, even though I'm not trying to say dual threat quarterback equals dual threat quarterback. These are 2 different guys. And, Anthony Richardson's a much bigger guy than Lamar Jackson. But your offensive line does not have to be tip top. And your wide receiving core doesn't have to be super, super great. That's where you get somebody in round 2 or 3 that's a tight end to pair with Chig Okonkwo and, maybe do a little bit of what Baltimore's been doing with and now I'm speaking more in relation to a Lamar Jackson scenario, but I think you could also kind of do that with Anthony Richardson, although we don't fully know what Tim Kelly's offense is going to be. So there it is, kind of long form answer.
I mean, it leads to 2 big questions, right? If that is the move to trade up to the number 3 pick, It's who are you doing it for between Richardson or Levis? At this point, it feels like you said C.J. Stroud, signs pointing to him landing in Carolina with that top pick.
That's my belief.
I'd agree with that. It seems like there's a pecking order, a more clear-cut pecking order than ever with those four guys.
And the owner of the Colts said, kid from Alabama's
Right.
good. So, I mean, take that for what you will, but that, sometimes they'll tell you things right to your face and you don't even realize it.
But the two big questions, one, who's it going to be, Richardson or Levis? And if you have a thought on that, 615-737-1045. I'm curious to hear from Titans fans if there's one or the other that you prefer taking a gamble on. And the other is, what does it take? Because the Arizona Cardinals do have needs. And yes, they, I'm sure, hope to have people knocking on their door, and I'm sure they're getting phone calls, and they need to get out of that number 3 pick, because why wouldn't you? Even if you're moving back one spot to 4, just get something out of that. But they do have needs, and you're talking about them drafting Will Anderson if they remain in the top 5. The Titans moving up to the 3rd pick would mean Arizona being bumped out of the top 10, right? So at that point, they're looking at the Titans and maybe saying, hey, we could stick around in the top 5 and get a game changer on defense because we need one. Mm-hmm. We need a Will Anderson or a Jalen Carter type. So how are you going to help us achieve that here? And there's obviously a guy set for a pretty big contract in Jeffrey Simmons that still doesn't have his deal done with the Titans. And I wonder if that move were to come together, the Titans going up to 3, if it would have to mean Jeffrey Simmons becoming an Arizona Cardinals, because the Titans don't have a
because you're limited
of
with
capital.
6 picks this year.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly think you're giving up something in 2024 if you're moving up.
Sure.
If you're not moving a star player.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
But just from a Cardinals
whether it's Jeffrey
perspective.
Simmons or not, I don't know. But,
But the Cardinals need a guy like that. That's their biggest need in this draft.
Sure.
Is that game changer, that guy who can just be a wrecking ball in the backfield. And Jeffrey Simmons can be that guy. I don't know that they can get that guy at 11. Can they?
It depends on how it all shakes out. Because, here's the thing, and this stands with where the Titans are right now, having the 11th pick. Every time a quarterback or somebody is taken, that shoves somebody down to 11. Like, let's say, all right, 4 quarterbacks, I think we feel pretty certain will go within the top, I said top 9 picks. I think it's more like maybe the top 7, could be top 5. Well, that's like picking at number 7, because you take those 4 out of the equation, and let's say you're not in the market for a quarterback, like hypothetically you're saying with Arizona, because you have Kyler Murray. That's like picking at number 7. So you got 7 shots at somebody, and it depends on, Will Anderson is top 5 prospect in this draft, regardless of position. Period. So it depends on who the next guy is. Somebody takes a corner, somebody takes a wide receiver. I don't know. Tackles are in that conversation, whether it's Paris Johnson Jr., Peter Skronsky. But you could get somebody really good at 11, just may not be exactly the guy you want if you're Arizona in this scenario.
Kevin on YouTube says, I'd take Anthony Richardson over Levis, please. I love that he said please. That rushing ability gives him a higher floor right out of the gate, in my opinion. But it seems like the overwhelming reaction from the YouTube chat, what we've seen on social media, what people have been calling in with is, don't trade up. Brandon says, draft Smith and Jigba, Paris Johnson at 11. Do not trade up. Do not deal Jeffrey Simmons. If anything, trade back appears to be the more common thread from Titans fans. Trade back and build on those needs at offensive line and wide receiver, and maybe grabbing a Hendon Hooker somewhere along the way.
And that's where I think the reality probably is more probable in this situation. But hey, what I know, they could trade up to 3, but I think trading down from 11 is the more sensible and conservative way, I guess, because you don't have that 4th round pick from the Julio Jones trade. So you can get some capital back. And listen, this is one of those drafts where from about pick 40 to 75 or 80, maybe even 90, there's a lot of really good talent, and some of it happens to be in areas where you need help. So that's the thing. We're 3 weeks out, and this is going to be crazy because of the changes that have already happened with the Titans and just the overall NFL part of this with the clamoring for the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Coach Mack says it all the time. There's the draft and there's the quarterback draft. And I'm telling you, Hendon Hooker's the 5th quarterback taken in this. And the more it looks like it's going to be somewhere towards the bottom of the first round.
Worth mentioning, the Titans have been at the pro day of all of these quarterbacks we're
That's
talking
correct.
about in
Yep.
some form or fashion.
That's right.
I believe
Rand
Carthon
Carthon was at Florida.
Right.
Mike Vrabel at Tennessee. Now we're talking Hendon Hooker.
Yep.
They were both at Ohio State for C.J. Stroud. I can't remember if both of them were at Alabama, but it would make sense in terms of proximity.
I believe Carthon was. I know Jason Hoteling was. He was down there coaching up Alabama offensive line prospects in Tuscaloosa. So, yeah.
And I know, and the both of them went to Kentucky.
Yep, they did. They went and watched Will Levis.
So, yeah, there's been vetting on all 5 guys.
And Josina Anderson this morning tweeted today, I'm told quarterback Anthony Richardson is currently expected to meet the Raiders, the Panthers, the Falcons, the Colts, the Ravens, and the Tennessee Titans on his visit tour per league sources.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're talking top 30 visits now. Now, that does not mean that is imminent that they draft him or any of the other guys, regardless of position, that have been reported to be a top 30 visit. But it works out that way sometimes where one or two of those guys, I've seen it more times than not. There may be somebody they like that they pick in the later round. It may even be undrafted at some point. But it makes it more interesting when you see that reported, that it's a top 30 visit. Because, again, you're allowed top 30 guys, and then you have a local pro day that is within a certain mile radius. So there's a local pro day, and I think that's happening this week. Anyway, that would be, when you invite Vanderbilt, MTSU, whatever, Austin P, and you have those in addition to your top 30 guys you ask and bring in.
what in sports made you say, oh, no, over the weekend? And it doesn't have to be sports. 615-737-1045. Let us know. We'll do that coming up next on 1045 The Zone. What is that one thing over the weekend? Sports, news, life, anything that made you just look at it and say, oh no. 615-737-1045. Want to hear from you, Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan, and Robert Walsh. Hit the music. So last week, had an unnamed pest control company come by my house.
Smart play by you being unnamed. That's good.
Because apparently there's a rodent somewhere within the frame of my household. Now, I do not get mice or rats or anything inside my house. I have never seen one.
Okay.
Well, you have a cat.
I have a cat.
That's
and
good.
That helps.
That helps a lot.
But apparently our landlord sent a pest control company that will remain unnamed to our house to eliminate some of these rodents. It was unbeknownst to me. So that happened. Okay, great, fine. And then on Wednesday, walk into the house after work, coming home after the show, walk into the kitchen, and it's kind of sniffing around a little bit. It's like something doesn't smell right. And, sometimes you throw something away in the trash can and you throw away some type of food that it makes the trash smell bad. It's okay. I took out the trash. Fixed it. Took out the trash. Whatever was in the trash can, I took it out, and we're good.
There's something dead in the trash.
Thursday, it was worse. Friday, it was much worse.
Uh-oh.
And we have come to realize that this unnamed pest control company came to our home, eliminated the pests, and then left them there. Left the dead carcass of a rodent of some kind, or maybe not a rodent. I have no idea. Within the frames of my house, whether it's under the house or in my attic or in the walls, I have no idea, because 3 different parties have come to our house, Rhett, to try and inspect and find this thing, and nobody's been able to find it. And my house smells terrible. Robert can attest to this.
I was at one of the parties that you were having at your house while your house was being
Smells like an
inspected by
episode
parties.
of what hoarders would look like on TV. If we had smell-o-vision.
The thing is, Lucas's house looks perfectly normal.
Right. It's not a hoarder's house.
But you just walk in and it just
hits you. It just punches you in the face.
You remember in the cartoons, like there would be like a pie in the windowsill, and it would be like a nice hand like wafting you forward.
Yes. Well,
this one is like a Donkey Kong wind-up punch.
Yes.
Well, this would be, if we're talking cartoons, would be like Pepe Le Pew.
Yes.
And when he has that trail behind him and the flowers wilt and the whole, yeah.
So my oh no of the weekend is the dead rat in my house, who I've named Benji, that is making our lives miserable.
Why did you name him Benji?
I just had to give him a name, and I don't know why that's the first one that popped in my head. It feels appropriate for some reason. I don't know.
But now here's the thing. Here's the thing about the unnamed pest control company. They may have treated, and then it was getting sick from the treatment.
Yeah, as a result,
it crawled
of the
into something.
Right.
They didn't necessarily leave it behind.
I don't think that they eliminated it and then just left the carcass.
Right. But that's
Not
a
my
problem,
job.
and that will make you say, "Oh no," for sure.
It is making my life terrible. So I'm going to come home. There's a 4th party coming to my house this afternoon to search for it. Just full-blown search party with flashlights and magnifying glasses.
Have Ghostbusters come over.
Yes.
There's got to be a dog specialty.
Ghostbusters.
Rat buster. Dogs can smell all these different things
Not
at
our
airports. You need to bring. There has to be a dog that is in charge of things like this that will tell you where the dead rodent is. But I feel like we've overstayed our welcome, much like the dead rodent in your walls.
Yeah, I'll keep you guys updated on the status of Benji. Rhett?
Mine is from the world of sports, and it comes from a top pick in the draft this year. Jalen Carter, Georgia. We know well about the story about they have actually released the footage of the high-speed chase where a teammate of his perished and someone from the training staff, a terrible thing there. And Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, publicly saying we're only entertaining interviews and the like from teams that are picking in the top 10 in this year's draft. And that made me say, oh no. Why? Because it's a silly move. First of all, you can't control whether he's going to tumble at all. He has such great athletic skills and prowess, although it didn't show up. He didn't do anything at the combine, and then he had to cut his pro day short. But What if someone wanted to trade up into the top 10? You're cutting off your nose to spite your face there. I mean, what are we doing? But that's definitely my oh no.
It's like they're trying to build back his status as a bona fide top 5, top 10 pick.
Yeah, it's just bona fide damage control.
Yeah,
That's what we're talking about.
Trying to build that narrative
He put
back.
on 9 pounds of fat, I think, between the combine and his pro day. He couldn't finish the drills as a pro day. I mean, that's not a good look, man.
It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with Jalen Carter.
Yes.
Because now you're starting to see him mocked back into that top 5 range with a team like the Seahawks that could take a quarterback for the future. They could address the defense.
I don't think he falls very far. I kind of would be surprised if he fell out of the top 10, regardless of what has happened here.
Robert Walsh has an oh no that could be a potential domino in the quarterback draft. So let's discuss when we come back. Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan, Robert Walsh hanging out with you until 1 o'clock on 104.5 The Zone.
What's going on from the Superbook.com sports desk? I'm Robert Walsh. UConn defeated San Diego State 76-59 to win the national championship last night. With that victory, that's the Huskies' fifth national championship in the past 24 years under three different coaches, and the first under Dan Hurley. UConn wrapped up one of the most dominant runs in recent tournament history. The average margin of victory was around 20 points. And that's it for Jim Nantz calling March Madness games. 354 tournament games called, 64 Final Four games called, and 32 national championship games. What a run for Jim Nantz, friend of 3HL. In the major leagues, the Braves beat the Cardinals 8-4. Ronald Acuna Jr. blasted a 3-run homer, and the Braves finished at 3. And they're 3-1 now. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and the Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Good morning. Could there be one domino in the upcoming quarterback draft that we're just not talking about right now? Been doing our oh no of the sports weekend. Still can give your 615-737-1045. You can submit it on Twitter at Lucas Panzica. Dave says his is people overhyping this report of the Titans moving up to that number 3 overall pick. Robert Walsh has one that also may have to do with that number 3 overall pick, potentially. Bert, what you got?
Well, that's true. The news being aggregated by Dove Kleiman, but he's also saying that this is being reported by Mike Florio,
Yes.
that Mac Jones has been shopped repeatedly to multiple teams by the New England Patriots. Now, I don't know what side you guys are on. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a Mac Jones truther, but I think the guy had a pretty tough slope to ski last year. He had, as an offensive coordinator, he had someone who had never worked in that position or that kind of job before. He was a defensive coordinator. He didn't exactly have the best plays being called or the best players to play with. If you'll remember the free agency that the New England Patriots won, where they signed such stars as Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith and Nelson Aguilar. All of those guys came crumbling down around the Patriots last year. Didn't really add up to much. But Mac Jones getting reportedly sold to the highest bidder, anybody that could have him. And that's my own note for the week. I just don't know if he definitely deserves to be on the trade market this early in his career.
Now, you know what? That makes it interesting because the New England Patriots have 11 picks in this draft. They have capital to move up to get a quarterback if they so desired. Now, Bailey Zappi is also there, but they have picks at 14, 46, 76, 107, and 117. They have 5 inside the top 125 picks. So, I don't know. Maybe that's somebody who jumps on the radar.
And apparently Lamar Jackson was interested in going there, as reported by Meek Mill. I don't know if you guys saw that or not, but like that would be up to Bill Belichick, was Robert Kraft's remark.
And then there were reports out of New England that Patriots joining a long list of clubs that say they are not interested in talking to Lamar Jackson. Here is the report from Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. It starts saying, no, things are not going well between Patriots coach Bill Belichick and quarterback Mac Jones. This was posted about an hour ago. Florio goes on to say, following the posting of the item regarding the lingering tension between Coach Bill Belichick and the 2021 first-rounder, more information has trickled in. Per a source with knowledge of the situation, Belichick has shopped Jones to multiple teams during the 2023 offseason. The full list of potential destinations is not known. The teams mentioned as potential destinations were the Raiders, the Texans, the Buccaneers, and the Commanders. Florio says, obviously, a trade has not occurred yet. That doesn't mean it won't happen. A team hoping to draft a quarterback could pivot to Jones if that team does not get the guy that it wants. So potentially talking about something materializing post-draft with Mac Jones. Obviously, that would not impact the quarterback draft, but it does throw an interesting wrench in things as the Mac Jones experiment in New England. And not totally on Mac Jones. The situation was not good in New England last season across the board. Matt Patricia's calling plays, but it doesn't look like it's going well so far in Foxborough between Mac Jones and the Patriots.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, and of course, there was health issues with Mac Jones last year, and you can talk about protection of the line or whatever, but yeah, I don't know. It seems, and somebody may sniff and decide to do that because he does have starting experience in the league. I mean, he's not a bag of donuts here.
Robert Kraft told reporters last week, saying, quote, "I'm a big fan of Mac. He came to us as a rookie. He quarterbacked in his rookie season, did a very fine job, I thought. We made the playoffs. I think we experimented with some things last year that frankly did not work when it came to him, in my opinion." Kraft defers to Belichick, though, when it comes to football decisions. But when you consider how Mac Jones could impact this quarterback draft, or how a potential Mac Jones trade being shipped away from New England could impact this quarterback draft, there's a variety of dominoes that could fall. The Texans are mentioned in here by Mike Florio as one of the potential destinations for the Patriots shopping Mac Jones. Peter King hinted yesterday in kind of his weekly assessment of things leading up to the draft, saying, hey, what if the Texans don't take a quarterback with that second overall pick? What if there's not a surefire guy that they like? Maybe they wanted a C.J. Stroud. He's gone. He's in Carolina after the first pick. And they decide to take a Will Anderson, a safer prospect on defense, and then potentially trade back up into the top 10 to take one of those leftover guys, whether that's Richardson or Levis or whoever else. Now, that seems like a roundabout way of potentially ending up with a pretty similar scenario, a risky way to go about things.
And, when you're looking and I said that in error earlier when I said about Indy being at 2. They're at 4.
Right.
But Houston is at 2.
Houston's at 2.
But, I mean, they have 2, 12, 33, 65, 73. So, I mean, they could do that. They absolutely could do
Houston's
that.
got the capital to do that.
Yeah. They have 11 picks in this draft, just like the New England Patriots do. But
and now not only would they be cutting off the Colts, if they traded back up to 3 to get a quarterback, they wouldn't also be cutting off the Colts. Now they would be cutting off the Titans, who have also been interested in that pick. So you would spite your entire quarterback-needed division to come in and pick a guy up while also picking up the best defensive player in the draft.
You say if Houston were to take a defensive guy, probably Will Anderson with that second pick, and then somehow trade to 3, trade back up into the top 3.
Sure.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what that would take.
That would be like a draft day scenario.
Yeah.
Like everybody talks about how unrealistic that movie is.
Kevin Costner movie.
Yeah, like
that would happen in draft
this
day.
pick, no matter what. That would be a fun draft day scenario.
It's just funny. I've mentioned to a couple of folks about that movie. One of those being John Robinson, and the reaction you get from that, like, dude, that stuff isn't even close to being how things. I'm like, oh, we know that, but just to see, it's like a keyword or phrase that just sets somebody off. It's like, come on, man, draft day.
What do we need? A punt returner. A punt returner. Get a punt returner. Like, so for this.
But I love the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, if you love sports movies, I love the movie. I think it's great.
I mean, that's definitely going through every GM's mind on draft day. What would Kevin Costner do?
By the way, to the 30th pick overall in the 2000 draft, Keith Bullock, happy birthday.
Oh.
KB's birthday today. Hope you're having a great one. One of the all-time greats, all-time leading tackler in Titans history. KB got another trip around the sun today.
Future Tennessee Sports Hall of Famer.
That's right. Congratulations on that, too,
Keith
by
Bullock.
the way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Happy birthday to him. I don't care.
Thank you, Stephen A.
Good luck.
We do care. Happy birthday, KB. But really, though, with the Texans scenario, so we brought up Peter King's little nugget, like, hey, just a shot in the dark. They're probably going to take a quarterback at 2. But there's a feeling around some league personnel that, hey, maybe they won't. Nick Caserio is very conservative in nature. If he doesn't have a guy he's in love with at that spot, he'll take the safer pick, a Will Anderson, and try to trade back up in a roundabout way to come out of there with a quarterback and with a potential franchise-changing player on the defensive side of the ball. Well, what if Mac Jones throws a wrench into all of that? Texans are listed on this list of potential teams laid out by Mike Florio, as told to him by a source, that the Patriots are potentially shopping Mac Jones. The Texans are on that list. What if Mac Jones is their answer, at least in the short term, and they get out of this draft without a quarterback? How would that shake things up with that number 3 overall pick? How would that enable the Colts to have a more wealth of options to get their guy with that number 4 overall pick? That is kind of a wrench or a domino that could be thrown into this whole quarterback draft discussion that has not been brought up once until today with this report by Mike Florio.
Or what if the Houston Texans decide they like Mac Jones better than the prospects that are there? Who knows?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If the Texans were to deal for Mac Jones, suddenly that opens up a slot for a team to get a quarterback. It gives the Colts an opportunity to have more options than just Anthony Richardson or Will Levis.
The appeal with Mac Jones, obviously the experience he has, and being under Belichick, that's always a plus, in my opinion. And you got a couple things. First of all, he's young. He's got the experience. The other is you would have vetted him just a couple of years ago yourself. So you can dig out your reports, scouting reports, and your evaluations from him. And if he's somebody that you liked, but Patriots took him, maybe that's, part of your decision, because you certainly have film to watch of him in multiple games as a pro now.
Yeah, the most common thought to this point has been D'Amico Ryans, former Alabama star, by the way, drafts another former Alabama star in Bryce Young. Maybe there's another Alabama quarterback in this discussion that we're not talking about, and it's Mac Jones.
Yeah.
615-737-1045. Eric in Nashville has an oh no for the weekend. What's up, Eric?
Hey, guys, you probably heard about this. So my oh no is this. Okay, UFC Endeavor, of course, bought the WWE, but now there are reports, I'm hearing some rumblings, that the talent backstage is not happy because there's massive layoffs coming, not only with wrestlers, but technical people and all that stuff. And now there's even a worse report that Vince McMahon is about to assume control of script writing and creative again. A lot of talent are not happy about that. There's some that are asking for their release if that happens too. So the morale backstage is horrible. Triple H could get either let go or have a lesser role. So we'll see what happens, guys. That's my oh no. Y'all take care, and we'll talk again soon.
And Eric, in the world of sports entertainment, that's a big oh no, because I am deathly afraid that is true with Vince McMahon taking this thing back over. First of all, he's got a creepy pencil-thin mustache now, and he's dyed his eyebrows and his hair. I'm like, what are you doing?
It's like his evil twin brother is taking back over.
If that's the case, then that may explain why WrestleMania ended kind of flat the other night, because there's an outcome a lot of people wanted that didn't happen with the world title, the undisputed world title and champion. But that's not good for them, because I feel like he got, for lack of a better term, too high on his own supply.
Vince McMahon, Eric's oh no for the sports weekend.
Yeah. It's much better with Triple H running the show. I'm telling you.
And that's the sad thing, man. WrestleMania was so good. Like, this was just like the culmination.
And then it ended flat.
Of all the work that Triple H put in. And then it was like, you know what?
Their television product's been better. The production's been better. The storylines. I don't like this if that's a thing. Vince, go to the house.
And shave that dadgum mustache off.
Yeah, it's creepy.
Just hang it up, buddy.
It is creepy. Don't like it.
Tennessee had its first scrimmage of spring football last Saturday in Neyland Stadium. Josh Heupel spoke on how the defense may have outperformed the offense on that first scrimmage of 2023. We'll get into that. Where can the Vols be most improved on the defensive side of the ball as we work our way through spring practice? Here from Tennessee head coach Josh Heupel, Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan hanging out with you until 1 o'clock on 104.5 The Zone. Spring practice in full swing in the world of college football, particularly in the SEC. For Tennessee, the orange and white game will be a week from this Saturday. Vols had their first scrimmage of 2023 last Saturday at Neyland Stadium. Lucas Panzica with you, hanging out with Rhett Bryan until 1 o'clock. Robert Walsh is making it happen. So, a lot of intriguing spring ball storylines happening around the SEC, Rhett. I mean, you don't have to look any further than the quarterback draft to see what we're talking about here. It's Bryce Young's gone at Alabama. Okay. Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson entrenched in a competition there to figure out who the signal caller is going to be for the Crimson Tide. Georgia going to offload plenty more defensive players from their second straight national championship run.
Stetson Bennett's in the draft. Bennett out the door. He'll be a probably 4th, 5th round pick.
There's a 3-man competition happening now in Athens to figure out who steps into that role. Will it be Carson Beck? Will it be Brock Vandegrift? And at Kentucky with Will Levis out the door, Devin Leary comes in from NC State as a transfer. Florida without Anthony Richardson. Graham Mertz transfers in from Wisconsin, a quarterback competition happening there. Now, Hendon Hooker, obviously, is done with his college career, but there's not a whole lot of drama around the Tennessee quarterback situation because of the way that Joe Milton performed in the Orange Bowl. I think if Joe Milton had a rough outing in Southern Florida against Clemson, then we'd have a very different conversation surrounding spring practice. He'd still be the favorite for the job. He'd still be that leader in the clubhouse, but you'd be keeping much more of an eye on Nico Iamaleava. Now, the eye is being kept on Nico Iamaleava more for developmental purposes. Okay, how soon can he be ready? There's no rush. You don't need him week 1 of 2023. Maybe you'll need him at some point in 2023. Injuries happen. That's how Hendon Hooker took over, was Joe Milton leaving in week 2 with a hip injury. But there's just not a lot of drama around spring ball in Knoxville this season.
Well, when you look at the quarterback position, all right, Joe Milton last year, in the opportunities he got, especially after the ACL that Hendon Hooker blew out in November, 971 yards, 10 touchdowns, no picks, completed almost 65% of his passes. So that explains to me right there, and especially with the bowl showing, which I think was what all Vols fans wanted to see, is how does he perform in a bigger game situation, and he did very well. I think that's why that Nico say it again for me again. Iamaleava. Thank you. I should know this, but I'm busy working on draft names.
Oh, like you have
Adetomiwa Adebare. So
Iamaleava.
Yes.
Oh, that's good. I didn't realize we had that. Who is that?
That's Nico, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's but it's off Schaefer's board. It's not ours. Oh, stolen.
Gotcha. So what was the name you just said? Is that the most complicated draft name that you've run into so far?
Yeah, that's probably. And there's been some doozies over the years.
Who's the defensive tackle from Northwestern?
Yeah, that's Adetomiwa Adebare.
Yeah, that's the one that trips me up. Cannot get that one.
He goes by Tommy Adebare.
That's easy.
Tommy and Nico.
But it's not as there's Siaki Ika, the defensive tackle from Baylor. But no, it's not super. There are some years where it's like, whoa, like Ifo Ekpreolumu, and I don't know. I mean, you name it. But I've been following, names like this for 25 years. Obafemi Ayanbadejo or Kabir Baja Biamila. I don't know. Tishmanga Biakabatuka.
My goodness. Well, at least you may be getting ahead on the Nico Iamaleava.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because in 3 years or so, you could very well be studying that name.
And that's why it's important that Joe Milton keep doing his thing, and Nico will get his turn for sure.
Yeah. So the focus for spring ball at Tennessee this season in 2023 has been much more about developing depth and the early enrollees coming in and which wide receivers past that initial 4 could potentially make a name for themselves. Well, they have an opportunity to make a name for themselves in 2023. But I think a big focal point is on this defense. You look at Tennessee in 2023, the defense was much improved. But when you ask yourself, what can be the most improved unit going into 2023, I said 23 earlier, I meant 2022, but going into 23, which one of those units can take that next step to turn Tennessee or help turn Tennessee into a contender? The easy answer is the secondary, especially at corner, where Tennessee struggled the most last year. Starting talent wasn't good enough to begin with. Injuries started to pile up, and then you saw real issues especially in the South Carolina game where Spencer Rattler just carves Tennessee up.
That one gives me nightmares thinking about it. Yes.
So now the question is, okay, where can Tennessee be the most improved? And the easiest answer is in the secondary because that was their biggest weak spot in 2022. But for me, Rhett, the pass rush is just the great equalizer in football.
Sure.
When it comes to defenses. That is the thing that can level out a secondary that will struggle to keep guys in front of them on the back end. And Tennessee's in a better spot now at the pass rush than they've been in each of the first two cycles of Heupel's off seasons. And Josh Heupel spoke after that first scrimmage last Saturday about that unit as defense kind of won the day with that scrimmage.
There's been times where all of them had. We have great competition on the edges. That's that defensive end. Tyler Barron, Tyree West on the edges, with our Leos from Roman to Josh to James to Caleb. We got great competition there. We can do some unique things with our front. I like how our interior is playing. I feel like we're playing with better pad level. We're using our hands better. We're coming off of the ball. So excited about the growth and looking forward to the back half of spring.
It's the first time in the Heupel era that Tennessee has this blend of veterans and young talent coming in at that position that can actually help them in the pass rush. They had it last year with the top-end guys like Tyler Barron, and you knew you needed something out of Byron Young, who has flashed a little bit at the Combine and at Pro Day, and it'll be really interesting to see where Byron Young ends up.
He's got 11 top 30 visits, but we were talking about the inconsistency there.
Yeah, and he finished his career strong, which is a good thing for Byron. 2.5 sacks in the Clemson game. Yep. He's an all-SEC player at the end of the day, but I do think there are questions about Young, maybe his physicality in the NFL, doing some things at Tennessee that he's not going to be asked to do in the NFL, but there's no question about his speed, his athleticism off the edge. Somebody's going to take a flyer on Byron Young at some point. Mm-hmm. But Byron Young's out the door, and that leaves the veterans like Roman Harrison with 7 career sacks, has been at Tennessee for forever, recruited by Jeremy Pruitt. Tyler Barron, 7.5 career sacks. Tyree West, coming in as a sophomore, had 2 sacks last year. James Pierce, 2 sacks last year. Joshua Josephs with 1 sack as a true freshman. Guys that came into the fold last season that you thought, okay, you need these guys to develop quickly if you want to have any sort of depth in the pass rush. And they flashed a little bit here and there, but Tennessee was very front heavy with the pass rush. If it wasn't coming from Byron Young or Tyler Barron, they probably weren't getting a ton of pressure on the quarterback. And they did it at spots throughout last season. Their third down defense was far better, in part due to the improvement with the pass rush. But now you've got Barron and Roman Harrison and those guys coming back, West and Pierce and Josephs taking another step, and then a guy like Caleb Herring from Riverdale High School, the number 1 prospect in the state with this last recruiting cycle, coming in as a true freshman. I feel like that is a much quicker path to taking that next step as a defensive unit, is improving the pass rush as opposed to getting in those elite talents at corner. And I think that goes across all levels of football.
Well, and certainly if you've got the pass rush, how many times have you seen good defenses with a good front seven, especially the front up there just terrorizing quarterbacks, that end up that the secondary, however rated it might be, and at whatever level, gets the gifts out of it. They can be in the right place at the right time when, things are effective up front. I think about, in Titans history, Michael Griffin is a rookie from Texas, and he goes to the Pro Bowl because he has, 6-7 picks?
7, yeah.
Albert Haynesworth and crew is terrorizing quarterbacks up front. So, yeah, it can be reciprocal that way. And I know that they're working on bolstering the secondary as a part of it because, listen, after that South Carolina game, you're scared to death about those possibilities. And again, the schedule is not very favorable for the Vols in terms of a murderer's row type schedule. But, if you can get it straight with the pass rush, I think the other stuff will work itself out to a degree. But when you think about their schedule, I mean, they've got – all right, so they won 11 last year, right?
Yeah, including the Orange Bowl.
That's correct. And so –
open with Virginia at Nissan Stadium.
That's correct.
September 2nd.
And they travel to Bama. They host the Georgia Bulldogs. They have the third Saturday in October, obviously, but they have their trip to the Swamp in September. They've got Kentucky and Missouri later on and a home game against Texas A&M. So that stuff's nuts. And then their non-division stuff isn't, super, super easy. So, what's the realistic expectations with this? Because the non-conference things is they have UConn, and they have Texas San Antonio, Austin Peay. And you can certainly gather up some victories there. I'm not just saying they get off the bus and they win, because it's doesn't always work out that way.
But when you think about expectations for someone like you that is so deeply entrenched in draft prep at the moment, but I know you guys work ahead. Like there are prospects you have your eye on for 2024. So I know that you've looked at Joe Milton, and obviously you watched him last season against Vanderbilt and in the Orange Bowl. But when you think about Tennessee football, kind of a bird's eye view, not having been all in on the recruiting side of things and who they've picked up in the transfer portal, where do you sit when it comes to expectations for Tennessee in 2023? Are you more on the side of when Nico Iamaleava steps into that starting role is when this program can really take that next step, or do you believe that the opportunity is there with Joe Milton with what you see in him as a quarterback and his skill set?
I think there is an opportunity with Joe Milton. Now, it's a smaller sample size, but he certainly finished the year with a bang. And, if he stays healthy, obviously that makes sure that Nico, can just continue to learn until his opportunity comes. But, no, I like Joe Milton as a prospect. And listen, he'll have one of the strongest arms in the NFL draft in 2024. I mean, we've seen him. He can throw it a mile. But he's starting to work on that touch and get that touch effectively. Realistically, I mean, look, if they get on a run, they could go 10-2. I think realistically, with a good season, 9-3 is what I'm thinking. Based on what I see.
I'm fascinated to see how Milton is talked about a year from right now. And a lot of that will depend on, obviously, what he does, his consistency this season, the touch, the health, because he's never shown really at any stop that he can stay healthy over a long period of time.
Correct.
He hasn't done that yet. But regardless of how it shakes out in 23, he's going to be talked about in the draft process, maybe in a similar vein to Anthony Richardson. Not saying that he's going to be considered a top 5 pick.
No, but if he has a one-season good sample size, yes.
But
and he's that kind of big dude who can sling it.
Yeah. You talk about a guy who has the measurables and the tools.
Yep.
Like Anthony Richardson, that doesn't mean Joe Milton's going to be a great NFL quarterback. The fact that Anthony Richardson can broad jump over 10 meters or whatever it was, doesn't mean he's going to be a good NFL quarterback, but the conversation around him becomes more interesting. And I think it might be pretty similar when it comes to Joe Milton next year.
And listen, the quarterback draft is always going to be a thing. And certainly when you're talking Drake May and the kid from Southern Cal, you start peppering in guys like this in the conversation because, again, Southeastern Conference, week to week, it's the deal. And that's no knock to the Big 10 or 12 or Pac-12, anybody else in Power 5. But how many SEC guys are on NFL rosters? I mean, it's way up there.
Yeah. I wonder at what point, when it comes to Milton in the short term, though, people will keep a less watchful eye on him, if that makes sense. Because I think Tennessee fans were very wary when Milton stepped in. Okay, how have you addressed those accuracy issues with the overthrows? And they were there against Vanderbilt. They were very much there.
Sure.
And then the Orange Bowl. I think Tennessee fans kind of came in with that wary sort of,
guarded optimism.
Guarded, yes, that's a perfect way to put it. Guarded optimism of, okay, can you put it together against Clemson, against the ACC champion, on a big stage, the Orange Bowl, biggest bowl game Tennessee's played in years. And he did. And then the next step in that is the spring game. Okay, are you on target? How's your touch? Are you overthrowing guys again? Are you reverting back to that at all? But I wonder at what point, that will kind of go away, where Tennessee fans will then step back and have that trust saying, okay, he's definitely, and maybe some already do, but I do think that there are many Tennessee fans, and if this is you, let us know, 615-737-1045, that will continue to watch Milton with that guarded optimism just because of who's sitting behind him.
Honestly, I don't think you're going to get that feeling of somewhat comfort till probably week 3 at Florida. And if he does well there. Because, Virginia, I'm sure he can probably handle himself against that, and certainly Austin Peay. But that third week, September 16th, at the swamp in Florida, I think is where you start to answer some of those questions. And, listen, hope springs eternal always, in early parts of seasons. But I think if he has a good showing there, that's a building block confidence-wise for the fan base.
By the way, a little bit of news regarding the Tennessee football program. This is from Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated. He reported today that the NCAA infraction case against Tennessee is headed to a contested hearing that'll be coming up this month. Dellinger says school officials, former head football coach Jeremy Pruitt, and former defensive coordinator Derek Ansley, now the defensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Chargers, are scheduled to appear before members of the Committee on Infractions later on this month in what has become a somewhat contentious fight, Dellinger says, between each of the three parties and the association. They received a letter announcing the 3-day hearing, which is scheduled for April 19th through 21st in Cincinnati. And if you need a refresher, this stems from the serious recruiting misconduct committed by Pruitt and his staff under former athletic director Philip Fulmer. Tennessee received its notice of allegations last July, which spelled out $60,000 worth of impermissible benefits and recruiting inducements provided to prospects by Pruitt, his wife, and several staff members. So a resolution between the school and the NCAA has not been reached. So you're talking about potential penalties that could be probation for the football program, for the institution, and also show cause penalties for Pruitt and those staffers. So something to keep an eye on as that hearing will take place here in a couple of weeks. And as is tradition with the NCAA, we won't get an answer on it for quite a while.
Thanks, NCAA.
Yes, always there for us.
Good luck. We're all counting on you.
When we come back, we'll talk about a former Tennessee player that we've mentioned a little bit on this show, Hendon Hooker. And it feels like he is shooting up draft boards. Let's try to figure out why that is. 615-737-1045. Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan hanging out with you on 1045 The Zone. The entire conversation around the quarterback draft has been centered around 4 prospects, right? We've talked about it ad nauseum. C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis. Obviously, there is a heavy local emphasis on that 5th guy that happened to wear number 5 in college, Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee. By the way, welcome in. Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan with you until 1 o'clock. Buck Rising, not feeling great today, so he's going to sit this one out. Robert Walsh, our producer. And Rhett, in previous weeks, in most of the lead up to this draft, it's like there were whispers here and there about, hey, Hooker, you don't be shocked if he kind of sneaks into the first round. It could be a team that gets antsy because all the quarterbacks are flying off the board and maybe
it's just too good of a pick, and they go,
right.
Yep, you know what? We've got him rated way higher than that. Let's go ahead and go up and get him.
Yeah, and maybe they're not so sure he'll be there on day 2, but for the most part, he had been thought of as a day 2 pick, right? Hendon Hooker.
And in some places, really, first part of the year before the Senior Bowl or any of that, he was mentioned in the 3rd round.
Right. Now that's changing, which is interesting because Hooker obviously is not working out. He's still recovering from the ACL. The recovery's going well. He's throwing, standing up. He said at his pro day last Thursday that the goal is to be dropping back in 2.5 weeks, that the goal is to be running straight line in 3 weeks. Says he's good to go for training camp, he believes. And suddenly the conversation around Hendon Hooker is changing, so much so that Mike Tannenbaum made waves when he mocked Hooker as the 5th overall pick to the Seattle Seahawks. Here in town, we were talking about it because he had the Titans taking Richardson at 11, but that type of thing only happens if there's another quarterback in the mix,
right.
and for him, that was Hendon Hooker. And then you have Todd McShay, who also has Hooker in the first round. In fact, let's hear from Todd McShay. He was on Get Up this morning, today, talking about just that, why he has Hendon Hooker in his latest mock draft going 23rd overall to the Minnesota Vikings.
All of a sudden, Hendon Hooker's name has become a big part of the conversation. Mike Tannenbaum continues to, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. What did you just say to me in a break?
When it's all said and done, I think he's going to be the best quarterback from this draft.
When Mike T says that, what do you think of that, McShay?
Well, Mike T is about to have 2 kids in college, so maybe he's taking some money from the Hooker family. To pay. But I mean, listen, I like Hendon Hooker a lot. I've moved him up into the first round despite despite the injury. But listen, I think for a team like Minnesota with the cap money that Kirk Cousins has and the fact that, well, I think he was 23rd or 24th in QBR this past season, doesn't show up in big games. So now with Hooker, you have a year to redshirt him. And yes, he's going to be 26 next January, but he's still a quarterback that you look at and say he can be a future franchise quarterback based off the tape and the improvement the last 2 years that he showed at Tennessee. So I like him in Minnesota. I think it's a great fit. And the Vikings have quietly been doing a lot of work on this quarterback class. So don't be surprised if Minnesota drafts a quarterback, whether it's Hooker or one of the other guys like Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, if they start to fall a little bit.
Minnesota only has 5 picks, but they have the 23rd overall pick. So he's suggesting that they're doing due diligence. Then that's where Hendon Hooker ends up as Kirk Cousins rides out his contract there. Well, let me say this. First of all, one of the reasons why he's rising up the board is something that Coach Dave McGinnis tells us all the time. There's the draft, and then there's the quarterback draft. There's the haves and the have-nots. And so for everybody out there listening, you're like, but Rhett, there's other quarterbacks in this thing, like Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA or Clayton Tune from Houston. That's true. But if you look at this thing, and we're talking about the tiering process and putting a draft board together horizontally, in that first tier of quarterbacks, in whatever order you want to put them, it is C.J. Stroud, it is Bryce Young, it is Anthony Richardson, it is Will Levis, and Hendon Hooker's the 5th name in that. And when you look at Hendon Hooker as a prospect, first of all, 6'3", 217, arms 33 inches, hands 10.5 inches. We don't have Kenny Pickett small hands disease here, right? Wing almost 80 inches, long prospect. So he looks the part. And when the knee is healthy, we've seen what he can do in getting the first down with his legs, if need be. And listen, there's going to be some knocks on him because of the offensive system they run at Tennessee with Josh Heupel. It'll be the same thing that Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt are answering because, well, you only lined up, you can listen. It's like Hendon Hooker said a few weeks ago, I can't help it if my receivers are wide open. So, given all those things and given medical, and that's the other part of this that would push it, is if medical timelines are good or better than expected, that would make some decisions for some front offices in this. But yeah, I've thought for a while, I said about 2 or 3 weeks ago, it wouldn't surprise me if he snuck into the bottom of the first round. And he could go in the bottom third of the first round now. I don't know about Mike Tannenbaum. I don't know about
top 5.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But he can, I'd be shocked if he wasn't a first round pick at this point, 3 weeks out.
615-737-1045. Cousin Danny in the borough wants to chime in on Hendon Hooker and the way he's rising up draft boards. What's up, Danny?
Hey, what's up, guys? Just wanted to put my 2 cents in here. I think that a big part of the reason that, we see quarterbacks move a lot this time of year up and down draft boards is just like Brett was saying, Coach Mack is always saying there's the draft and then the quarterback draft. But also think about how some teams' priorities and needs have really shifted post, the big part of free agency earlier in the year right now. And when you look at a guy like Hendon Hooker, it may be, easy to dismiss some of what his achievements were because of the high-powered offense that Josh Heupel's put together at the University of Tennessee. But let's really look at a couple of big things here. This is not just a first-read quarterback. If you go back and watch the tape from Florida and from the Bama win this past year, Hendon Hooker was finding his third option. He was finding his drop-down guy on the run, avoiding elite pass rushes from SEC defenses, and making accurate throws. What's the biggest hit that you hear about Anthony Richardson and Will Levis? They are inaccurate QBs who need to work and develop before they are pro-ready. In 2 years as a starter at Tennessee, Hendon Hooker's touchdown-to-interception ratio was 58-5. He only threw 5 interceptions in all of the starts that he had and all of the passes that he threw at the University of Tennessee against elite defenses. This is a guy where you go back and you really look at what's happening in the draft and what quarterback-needy teams are, or even not quarterback-needy teams, but teams who are, they have their vets who are nearing the end of their career. This is a perfect guy to come in and sit for a year if he has to and take over. And as far as the ACL is concerned,
he made some great points.
Yeah.
He really did.
Thanks for the call, Danny. We appreciate it, man.
Listen, there's going to be knocks on any. Listen, Bryce Young is the most ready of any of these, but the durability is the question because of his slight frame.
Yeah.
C.J. Stroud's right there, and he's the safer bet because he is more of the prototypical size. Will Levis is going to make somebody a high draft pick. He's going to be a high draft pick just because he fits the prototypical size and stature. 6'4", 229, arms 32, hands 10 and 6/8 inches, 78-inch wing. And talk about, it's not just accuracy. There's security issues. He had 29 fumbles in his time at Kentucky. So, I mean, all of these guys need refinement at some point. But how much more than others? I mean, yeah, you're right about that.
Now, Hooker did have some accuracy issues, especially early in the season, that you can point to that are kind of masked by his numbers. And Hooker also had, just playing devil's advocate a little bit, he also had a go-to guy and Anthony Richardson did not. He had a Cedric Tillman last season and early portion of this season before the injury, and then he had Jalen Hyatt.
Yep.
Now, Tillman, I will say, also got hurt on a ball that was a little too high by Hooker. Tillman has to go up and get it on the sideline. He's tackled awkwardly and comes down on the ankle against Akron. So there were some accuracy issues for Hooker early in the season as you're just trying to figure out why he's being talked about in a clearly lower tier than a guy like an Anthony Richardson or a Will Levis. But I also think that maybe somehow not working out throughout this entire process has helped him in a way because it's just accentuated what I think are strengths of his, which are his ability to talk to a room. He's always been good in front of the media. You imagine he's good in these meeting rooms.
You hit the nail on the head.
He's clearly prepared for questions about the nature of Tennessee's offense and how that might work against him in the league because he has talked about it a ton in front of the media, which makes you think that he is prepared when he's talking about it with teams. And it's just kind of put a magnifying glass over all of those aspects of his character and football mind, where you don't have to worry about him having some inaccuracies throwing the ball at the combine because he can't. He physically can't.
He won his week at the Senior Bowl, and he won the week at the combine for his own stock just because of the reasons you outlined. That's 100% correct.
Yeah.
When you get to talk to the young man, and he carries himself well, I'm sure he wowed plenty of people in those interviews. Absolutely.
Bruce Feldman has Hendon Hooker mocked in the first round. And there's a guy who's got his ear on the ground in the college football world that does great draft work. He's going to join us at 12:20. So stick around for that. And looking forward to hearing Bruce Feldman's insight on that. But when we come back, we ask you, which NFL teams can become contenders with a good 2023 draft? Not the Bills or the Chiefs that are contenders now that can continue to build on that. I'm talking about a team that you look at now and you say that is not a Super Bowl contender, but can become one in 2023 with a good draft in a few weeks. We'll go around the room. We want to hear from you. 615-737-1045. It's Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan, and Robert Walsh with you until 1 on 1045 The Zone.
What's going on from the Superbook.com sports desk? I'm Robert Walsh. Last night, the UConn Huskies defeated the San Diego State Aztecs 76-59 to win the national championship. With that victory, the Huskies have won their 5th national championship in the past 24 years under 3 different coaches. UConn wrapped up one of the most dominant runs in recent tournament history. The average margin of victory was 20 points. And that's it for Jim Nance, fan of 3HL. That's it for him calling the March Madness games. 354 tournament games called, 64 Final Four games, 32 national championship games. Jim Nance, one hell of a career. And in Major League Baseball, the Braves beat the Cardinals 8-4. Ronald Acuna Jr. blasted a 3-run homer. The Braves are now 3-1 on the year. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and the Vols. This is 104.5. The Zone.
Which NFL team can become a contender with the 2023 NFL Draft? Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan with you until 1, trying to get stuff done despite Robert Walsh's best efforts.
Hey, how about Lance Zierlein's latest mock draft on NFL.com?
We're watching him now on NFL Network, and it caught both of our eye because right there at the bottom of the screen, it says Lance Zierlein mock draft, 4th overall pick via trade. Robert Walsh, quarterback, C.J. Stroud to the Baltimore Ravens.
Robert, you and I have had this conversation. That's the guy, if you're replacing Lamar Jackson, that I would go as a Baltimore guy.
Yep, and I would be tickled pink if we ended up with C.J. Stroud.
So he's got the Panthers taking Bryce Young. He's got the Texans with your theory from a previous segment about
Peter King's theory, but yes.
Yeah, Peter King's theory about taking a defensive player and then going with a quarterback later on. He's got him taking Tyree Wilson, the edge rusher from Texas Tech. Will Anderson is a pick for the Cardinals at 3 overall, and then here's the Ravens at 4 getting C.J. Stroud.
Now that's intriguing. That's the most interesting dynamic I've seen so far in the top 4 of one of these mock drafts lately.
The Titans taking Jackson Smith and Jigba, the receiver from Ohio State, at 11.
That's also becoming more and more common, JSN to the Titans at 11. Okay, that's intriguing. So the Baltimore Ravens with C.J. Stroud, that is Lance Zierlein's mock, trading up to 4. That would mean the Cardinals stay put at 3, and the Texans take a defensive player at 2. And that's interesting that he's got who did he have? Not Will Anderson. It was the Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech.
I don't know how Baltimore does it either because Baltimore only has 5 picks, and they got the 22nd overall pick in the first round. So they're definitely dealing something from the future with 5 picks.
But even with that pick, I don't think, and you can call me whatever you want to, I don't think Baltimore would be a contender with that pick, with C.J. Stroud. It does restart their rookie quarterback time where they can spend some more in free agency, bring some bigger guys in because they're spending less on quarterback, but I don't think that makes them a contender in that trade scenario. But if we were going to talk about, like we were discussing the last break, teams that could be made into contenders through this draft, who's the first teams that come to mind for you guys?
So that's the question here, and it's not whoever drafts Bryce Young that can become a contender then in 2 years, or Anthony Richardson that when he gets that redshirt year, so to speak. I'm talking about who is not one now, like Bert said, that after this draft haul becomes one for the 2023 season. I've got one that I don't think Titans fans are going to like, Rhett. So I'm gonna let you go ahead.
By the way, in this Lance Zierlein third mock, he's got Anthony Richardson going to the Patriots at 14. That means they didn't even have to trade to get who they wanted.
Zierlein's all over the place with this thing. I love it.
Yeah.
If the draft is half as crazy as Lance Zierlein's latest mock draft, it's going to be a fun draft weekend.
All right. Mine is a previous competitor in playoff circles, and that would be the Seattle Seahawks. That there's somebody who they moved on from Russell Wilson, got a king's ransom for that, and Geno Smith had a nice year. They ended up awarding him a contract because of that. But here is the Seattle Seahawks with 5 picks in the top 85 picks. They have picks 5, 20, 37, 52, and 83, which means they could trade up or down and do whatever they want in this draft. 10 total picks overall. They're not that far away from being something really good because they have some decent pieces in place. And, maybe they take a receiver to go with DK Metcalf and company. Maybe they take a quarterback at 5 and let that person hang behind Geno Smith until Geno Smith gets a short leash. And, that's how that usually works out. But that's the one I'd point to first and foremost. Now, I've got a couple of other ideas. What do you got?
I'm keeping it in the AFC South because I look at a team that has its franchise quarterback in place. And the Jacksonville Jaguars have that.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have 9 picks in 2023.
24, 56, 88, 121, 127, 185, 202, 208, and 226.
They have at least 1 pick in every round, including 2 fourth round picks and 2 sixth round picks.
Right.
Calvin Ridley will be playing in 2023. He'll be wearing the number 0 for the Jacksonville Jaguars at wide receiver.
Evan Ingram is franchise tagged.
Franchise tagged for a season after a massive year for the tight end.
Marvin Jones goes back to Detroit.
Christian Kirk back in Jacksonville. Yep. With that wealth of picks and some of the young players the Jags have on defense, number 1 overall pick, Trayvon Walker from Georgia. I think about the Jags as a potential contender in 2023.
Sure.
In year 2 under Doug Peterson. The shift was so tangible last season under Peterson. And it took them a while because they had to get the stink of Urban Meyer off of them. But by the time they're halfway through that year 1 under Doug Peterson, that team was put together. They were executing. They were leaning on each other. And they finished the year, obviously, with the winning streak, beating the Titans, winning the AFC South.
Yeah.
And coming back to beat the Los Angeles Chargers.
No, I don't like your scenario, but I wouldn't disagree with it.
It's not a scenario that Titans fans will favor whatsoever. But I truly think just because of the franchise quarterback in place and the pieces around him, the Jags are the closest team in the AFC South to being a Super Bowl contender, and 9 picks could get them there potentially in 2023.
Robert, you got a guess on this?
I do. You guys both went with teams that made the playoffs. I'm going to go off the board. This team did not make the playoffs, but I think they're due for it. I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions. They have 5 picks in the top 100. They pick 6, 18, 48, 55, 81. 2 of those picks are from trades. The Matthew Stafford trade is the 6th overall pick. Their 55th overall is for sending T.J. Hawkinson to the great purple yonder in Minnesota. I think they're just due. They have a tough coach. They have a quarterback who has continually got better. They've got the picks to do that. If the picks they've made in previous years can get healthy, like Jamison Williams, they added David Montgomery. I think they're on the cusp of being a playoff team and a contender.
And I'll piggyback off what you're saying. At pick 18, they could take care of something they have been trying to do since the departure of Barry Sanders, and that's get them a hoss running back. I know they got David Montgomery, but you could get Bijan Robinson right there, and you could win a lot of ball games being able to run the ball and do things like you want to do.
Just like what you're talking about, think about what that would do for the play action. Think about, and he fits right into what Dan Campbell wants to do. He wants a bunch of kneecap biters, right?
So he would take. I see them taking a top defender at 6, because
probably whoever the best corner is in their opinion.
Yeah, because the kid from Ohio State never really worked out. His name escapes me.
If you wouldn't have asked me, I could have told you.
Anyway, I see them taking, whether it's Devin Witherspoon from, Illinois or whoever I think they take a corner right there. But at 18, they could take Bijan Robinson and look out NFC, especially NFC North.
I wonder about Jeffrey
Okudah, that's right.
I wonder about Bijan Robinson even being there at 18, to be honest.
That is
with
going
the
to be
Eagles
the
at
one
10,
mystery.
There's your question.
He might be the prospect that analysts, scouts, and the like are most unanimous on in this draft. Is that a stretch to say that? And it's a running back, so he's not going to be a top 5 pick. Obviously, it's a position that's been devalued over time.
But he's a top 5 talent in this draft.
Sure. Unquestionably. And the returns on him
because he is
so
a 3-down back. He can catch it out of the backfield. He has a great body of work.
The only thing that's going against him in this draft is the wealth of talent at running back in this draft. That is the only thing in my mind that can go against him, where you could make the argument we could draft him here, or we could draft a premium position and try to hit running back later because there is so much depth. But
maybe we want Tajay Spears in round 3.
Sure. But if you want the top talent, he is that. Unanimous.
Yeah, unquestionably.
There's nobody else you could argue could take that spot from him.
No, so he's a stud.
Yep. And I don't think anybody could be upset with you drafting Bijan Robinson.
I'm fascinated to see.
I'm going to tell you another one that could be a contender, and it's just what Ryan Poles has done in his first year and change as general manager of the Chicago Bears. If Justin Fields is the quarterback and sticks and hits, which, jury's still a little out on that, but if he becomes the real deal, I mean, look at them. They got 10 picks. They've been very active in free agency with all the money they had. I mean, they've done well, and they could make a move forward. And hey, Bijan Robinson in Chicago wouldn't be bad either.
We will revisit this conversation after the NFL draft and see which teams we still think fall into that category based on their haul. But for the moment, we need to talk to Bruce Feldman of The Athletic, who had some very interesting nuggets on his latest mock draft regarding the Titans, regarding Hendon Hooker, and very unique insight from college coaches and scouts in that mock draft for every single prospect. We're going to dive into it with Bruce Feldman coming up next on 104.5 The Zone. Mock draft season is in full swing, and you're going to see a lot of them. You're going to see some that are taking shots in the dark, some that it's just how they want it to fall, and then there's others that use intel and insight from people that matter, whether that's league sources, college coaches that game planned for and played against these players that are about to get drafted. Our next guest, his mock draft certainly falls under the latter category. Bruce Feldman of The Athletic joins us now on 104.5 The Zone. His latest mock draft is out. Unique insight on every single player directly from coaches who have game planned, scouted, or played against these players. Some really good perspective in there, and Bruce joins us now. Bruce, thanks for being here. Hope you're doing well.
For having me.
Jumping right down to that number 11 pick, Bruce, you have the Titans taking Jackson Smith-Njigba, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. Ohio State's pro day was interesting because Smith-Njigba was working out, yet it felt like there was more talk about Marvin Harrison Jr., who's not yet draft eligible, than there was about Jackson. The quote that Jordan Reed put out of ESPN said he received a text from an NFL scout. It was like window shopping at a Lamborghini dealership for the model that doesn't come out until next year. Like I said, you have Smith-Njigba to the Titans at 11. So what did coaches you talked to tell you about the way they view Jackson Smith-Njigba's skill set versus a guy like Harrison and some of the other Ohio State wide receivers that have come out in recent years?
The coaches who've actually faced him could not stop raving about Jackson Smith-Njigba. I mean, you had two players last year, same position at Ohio State, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, first-round picks who ended up being 1,000-yard receivers, both of them. And all the coaches I talked to, all of them, every single one thought Smith-Njigba is better than both of those guys. He is bigger. He is more physical. He has better change of direction. And they just felt like he was kind of the alpha of that group. I think he's the best receiver in this draft. I actually don't even think it's close. I think he is clearly the best guy. I don't think this is a great group of receivers, but he is a big-time player. And some of the coaches I talked to thought he is actually can do more stuff than Marvin Harrison Jr. There's some, Marvin Harrison Jr. is bigger. He's got more straight line speed. He's super talented, but Smith-Njigba can do a lot of damage in the slot and probably is a better route runner at this point.
Bruce, also in your latest mock, you have the Titans trading back into the first round, giving second and third rounders with Seattle at 20 to take Will Levis, the quarterback from Kentucky. And you lay it out here in The Athletic well, as you always do, with pointing to the age of Ryan Tannehill, the end of his contract, et cetera, et cetera. But Will Levis, obviously, if he were to fall like that, that would be something. But second of all, the attraction for Will Levis, and Titans fans may or may not like this, but it's got to be that he is the prototypical size. In fact, he would be maybe a little bigger and younger version of Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, and I mean, look, like Tannehill, really good athlete, a lot of speed, but yeah, he is a physically strong dude with a big arm. There was a lot to like coming off of 2021. Remember when he transferred into the SEC from Penn State, he got there after spring ball. So he didn't have time to really get acclimated to his new teammates or to Liam Cohen, who was the new OC at the time. And he played really well. I think Levis was impressive in what they did. Talking to a lot of coaches, they were very, very wowed by some of the things he did. And then last year, Liam Cohen goes back to the NFL. They lose a bunch of good offensive linemen. They lose Wan'Dale Robinson. Now he has young receivers, a little banged up. And the things I had heard from the people who played him was the new OC that they had, Rich Scangarello, who'd come from the NFL, was not a great fit. It was very predictable. There really wasn't much of an identity offense, and Levis struggled. But having said all that, the people I spoke to kept on, one of them was specific and was like, look, we've seen him do it. We know because he was accurate as a junior, played with more touch, played with more confidence. It's just last year he struggled. And so I think there is a little more of a gray area with him than there are with the top quarterbacks at the top of the draft. Certainly it was Stroud and Bryce, but he's really talented. And I think if you're talking about him sitting there, if he falls close to 20, I think he's a guy that if you're the Titans, I think you have to look at and say, okay, Do we give this guy, because he's played in a bunch of different systems. I mean, I mentioned the 2 he played in at Kentucky. He played in really 2 other ones at Penn State. So that's a lot for a young quarterback to navigate.
So, Bruce, I want to ask you, delving a little further than your expertise with your latest mock. I'm always fascinated by your freak list. And so I never had a chance to talk to you before, but I wanted to ask you, what is the greatest factor in figuring out who goes on your freak list every year?
It's usually, I mean, the biggest thing of how I started doing it, whatever it was, almost 20 years ago now, was who was the guy in that athletic program that everybody just kind of raves about, who is just different. And so it's some unique ability. It's the 320-pound lineman who's quicker than most of the slot receivers in the program, or it's the guy who's the strongest one anybody's ever seen, or it's a lot of stuff that quite honestly translates to the NFL combine. The guy who vertical jumps 43 inches and you're like, wait a minute, what? That kind of thing. And so it really grew from that to the point where, as somebody who's, been a sideline reporter for Fox Sports for a long time, I'm out on the field before games, and the people who are out there usually in warm-ups are NFL scouts. And so we ended up with a lot of conversations, and it's really grown into something like that where, when I go to the combine every year, it's a lot of the same chatter as the stuff I'm digging into all off season, working on the freaks list.
Bruce Feldman, our guest on 104.5 The Zone. You can watch him on Fox. You can read him on The Athletic, at Bruce Feldman CFB on Twitter. His latest mock draft has the Titans taking Jackson Smith and Jigbo with the 11th pick, and then trading back into the first round again to take Will Levis with the 20th pick. Speaking of those athletic freaks, Bruce, Anthony Richardson, certainly one of them, landing in your mock draft 4th overall to the Indianapolis Colts. I'm curious, for a guy like you that, as you said, you're on the sideline for these college football games for Fox's coverage, that is so deeply entrenched in the college football world and also, obviously, the NFL draft, where do you see the biggest disconnect or difference in the way the college football world views guys like Anthony Richardson and Will Levis? When you have college football, whether it's diehard fans or media members, scratching their heads wondering why Anthony Richardson is the 4th best prospect potentially in this draft, given what he showed last year at Florida. Where is that disconnect to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's 2 guys. The 2 guys that Anthony Richardson is probably the guy he gets comped to. One is Josh Allen, and the other one is Cam Newton. I want to start with the latter because Cam Newton's arguably the greatest college player I've ever seen. Anthony Richardson, not quite as tall, but, both guys are big enough to play defensive end. Anthony Richardson's a little faster, probably has a little stronger of an arm, but it's close. But the difference is one guy put Auburn on its back in a sec. Aside from Nick Fairley, it wasn't like there was a bunch of NFL dudes on that Auburn team, and they won the national title. Anthony Richardson looked good in beating Utah, but then it was really up and down, right? And so I get why college football fans and media are like, wait a minute, really that high for him, kind of thing. But the other comp is Josh Allen, and he's the guy that myself and almost everybody I know who covers college football got wrong in terms of what we expected from the NFL. Josh Allen, like Anthony Richardson, completed in the mid-50s, percentage-wise in college. Josh Allen played at a much lower level. He was playing at Wyoming, and he really struggled whenever he played even Power 5 teams. The completion percentage scares a lot of people. But when he got to Buffalo, he had, Brian Daboll, the former Alabama OC and now the Giants head coach, did an amazing job with him because they let him really lean on making plays with his legs and certain things that they really majored in. And there was a lot of other stuff that they steered clear of. And I think they utilized him. And I remember I did one game as a sideline reporter in the NFL, and it was his rookie year against the Lions. And I came back, it was late in the year, and I told some of my buddies in college football side, and I was like, I think we're going to be wrong on Josh Allen because they love him there. And there's a lot of things that they're doing with him that just kind of plays into his strengths. And so I think Josh Allen is probably the best argument certainly for Anthony Richardson. I think to some degree for Will Levis as well.
So that's where I start to look at the conversation around Hendon Hooker, because as you said, people cite Josh Allen for guys like Levis and Richardson, saying, well, see, the accuracy issues can be fixed. They can be worked on, even if he didn't have an overly productive season his final year of college football. But for a guy like Hendon Hooker, when the concerns are more about the offense that he's coming from, about seeing guys open, about going through progressions, who was insanely productive in his final 2 seasons, especially his final season of college football, why is the conversation then not similar around Hendon Hooker when it comes to we can develop that part of his game when there's more of a sample size of him producing at the college football level? And I ask you that also wondering what you think is the biggest factor that Hendon Hooker does appear to be rising up boards in these pre-draft conversations.
Yeah, when I went to the Combine a month ago, I had lunch with an NFL quarterback coach, and I said, who impressed you the most in the meetings? And he said Hendon Hooker. They loved him. The demeanor he had. Also, he didn't have just have really great insight and knowledge of what they did at Tennessee, but this coach was very impressed in what he could recall and the depth of his knowledge of what they did at Virginia Tech. And I think now we're seeing a lot of guys, Will Levis in this boat too, who are transfer quarterbacks. So I think the NFL is getting used to, okay, what does this person recall about what their old offense was? They have, kind of a baseline understanding of that. Hendon Hooker really impressed people there. And so I was like, okay, let me, I was pleasantly surprised at the feedback I got when I talked to all these coaches who played him. I mean, for people who haven't read the mock that I have on the Athletic, go look for the Hendon Hooker stuff, because I think, even if you're not a Tennessee fan, I think you will really see that for everybody who said, oh, this is the 4 big quarterbacks, I actually think Will Levis has a chance to be overtaken. It would not surprise me if Hendon Hooker went in front of him. Now, he's coming off a knee injury, and he is older, and the age is made, I feel like that's been overplayed a little bit about, him being 25. It's not like he's 30, right? So he's going to get better, at some point into the season where he can play, but I think 2 or 3 years from now, I think he's going to be a really, really good quarterback because he has really good pocket presence, really good arm. Everybody talks about how smart he is. They like how he sees the field. He is athletic. I mean, there's a lot to like there. So, all right. So, he's in a offense that there's going to be some transition coming from what he did at Tennessee, but he's going to have time to acclimate because he's coming off injury. And I think whoever takes him, they know that, all right, he's not going to be a day one compete for the job guy. So I think he can sit and learn. He showed he learned the Tennessee offense and mastered it. I give him also extra credit because, as you guys well know, that program has been in a ditch for a long time, and he was as big a reason, along with Josh Heupel, obviously, to get them out of it and to win the games he won. I think to me, if he's not taken in the top 25 picks, somebody I think got it wrong. Now I get it. Once you get past 25, you look at those teams. The Cincinnati Bengals, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Eagles, they do not need to mess with a quarterback. They have their guy. But I think for a lot of other teams, whether it's the Vikings, maybe even the Bucks at 19, I think you need to look and say, man, this guy's really gifted, and he's got that it. Again, go read what the coaches who played him, they raved about him and have a lot of respect for Hendon Hooker.
Bruce, I want to ask you about 2 different picks in your latest mock. One is we discussed before you came on with us about how good a talent Bijan Robinson is, the running back from Texas. You have him taken 10th overall by the Eagles. He's got to be a top 5 prospect in this draft, in my opinion, regardless of position. I want you to explain why you think that's a good fit at 10. And then the other one on defense, because of where he played, the size that he is, and the measurables at the Combine are eerily similar to Aaron Donald, even though there's only one Aaron Donald, Kalijah Cansey from Pitt.
Yeah, let me start with Bijan. So, everybody knew about Bijan if you're a college football fan. Even before he got there, he was a 5-star, kid from Arizona. And, in fairness to him, he never had a very good offensive line at Texas. The quarterback play was really spotty to be on top of it. He was the marked guy. People rave about him. Like, there are coaches I talked to who thought he was the best player in college football. Great receiver out of the backfield, really elusive, really dynamic, blocks, everything. And when this mock went up, I had some Eagles fans going, "No way we're taking a running back at number 10." Well, here's the logic to this. You almost won the Super Bowl. This is a kind of guy, you're helping Jalen Hurts out. You're honestly helping out, a really good receiving core in addition to that. This guy can put you over the top. You are close. If you're adding another edge guy to an already stacked defensive front where some of those guys are getting older, it's like, but we don't need to worry about 2 years from now. You can get a really good edge guy at the end of the first round or in the second round. Bijan is different from all these other running backs, and that's why I think he could be put him over the top guy. And if you're saying he's Edgerrin James, if you're saying he's, Edgerrin James or a combination of that and Marshall Faulk, because he's that good of a receiver, that kind of weapon, I think that is going to, make the Eagles offense that much more dangerous. As far as Kancey, he's unique, right? I mean, he's not quite as long and not quite as strong as Aaron Donald, who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he is as slippery, he is as quick, and when you see the time, he broke Aaron Donald's record for DTs at the combine in the 40, running 4.68.
That first 10 wasn't bad either.
No, and he is the guy when, like, all the coaches in the ACC, there's obviously been hype defensive linemen out of Clemson, and there's a good one out of Georgia Tech and really good one out of Louisville. And there's been good ones out of Miami in recent years. This is one who's kind of different. They're like, man, he's everywhere. You just turn on the film and your just jaws dropping. It's got to be a scheme fit because he's 281 pounds, and that's not for everybody. Like the New Orleans Saints, we're not going to draft a Kalijah Kancey with the scheme they run. But I think he is so disruptive, and I had him going to the Lions because their GM, Brad Holmes, he came from the Rams. He saw firsthand what a dominant weapon Aaron Donald was, how disruptive. And Kancey's probably the closest thing we've seen to Aaron Donald, since Aaron Donald. And that's a pretty big statement.
He is Bruce Feldman of The Athletic. You can watch him on Fox during football season, his latest mock draft with pointed intel from college coaches that have experience planning for or scouting against all of these prospects. So, Bruce, thanks so much for the time, man. Great stuff, and looking forward to seeing what you got coming up next on The Athletic.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
All right. At Bruce Feldman, CFB on Twitter.
That's good stuff, man.
Really good. We tweeted a link to the story, so go check it out on 1045 The Zone Twitter account. When we come back, I want to read the intel that Bruce got from coaches about Hendon Hooker because they're raving about him. And maybe it'd be interesting to stack that up next to Will Levis, who, like we said, Bruce has the Titans picking Smith and Jigba at 11 and then trading back into the first at 20 and taking Levis. Then he's got Hooker going 3 picks later to the Minnesota Vikings. We'll read what coaches told Bruce Feldman about Hendon Hooker and Will Levis. We'll do the polls. We'll wrap it up when we come back on 1045 The Zone. Dancing all the way to the NFL draft.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
At the end of April. Great chat there with Bruce Feldman.
He was awesome. Hey, listen, he's one of the reasons, that I have an athletic subscription like anybody else. It's like the all-stars of sports writing went in one place, and I always look forward to seeing the freak list he puts out every year. I forgot he'd been doing it that long, too. He said about 20 years he's been doing it.
Yeah, you talk about a guy that's got 1 foot in each circle, right?
Yeah.
College football and NFL. I feel like those are the guys that you should look to because this is where those worlds collide.
Sure.
And the guys that have the information coming from both sides, because there are disconnects sometimes when it comes to how certain circles view Anthony Richardson versus how National Football League circles.
Well, it's like, Daniel Jeremiah saying on his podcast about you should listen and don't sleep on the Titans trading up to 3. They're exploring the options. I take that with some validation because he has been an NFL scout. He knows a lot of these people. So doesn't mean it's going to happen, but he got it on my radar like, interesting. All right, we'll see what happens.
So Feldman, like we said, has former Tennessee quarterback Hendon Hooker being drafted by the Vikings at 23. He's got the Titans taking Jackson Smith and Jigba, which has been pretty common recently with that 11th overall pick, and then trading back into the first, and he has the Titans selecting Will Levis with the 20th overall pick, and then Hooker going off the board just 3 picks later. Here is what Bruce Feldman heard, the coaching intel on Hendon Hooker. Now, it's 3 big paragraphs. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. I'm going to read you the middle one, where the quote is, I think he's super underrated. He played in 2 significantly different offenses. I was super impressed with him both in our game and on tape. I know that in that offense, he's throwing into space and reading the leverage of the defender where they spread you out so much more horizontally in one-on-one situations. So he probably only saw quarters coverage. And man, he's not reading, are they rolling strong, rolling weak, reading cover 2, but he would sit in the pocket and hang tough. He can make all the throws. He can throw with touch. He might not run straight line as fast as Will Levis, but I think he's able to escape and create better and has much better pocket presence. I feel like that right there sums up the strengths and weaknesses of Hendon Hooker as well as anything I've read in one place.
No, I think that's accurate.
Be really interesting to see what the next step is in this draft quarterback carousel. But for now, polls. Do it, Robert.
Hey, Lucas, because I don't have that read in front of me, tell them about all the fantastic things that happened to Fords over at Two Rivers Ford.
Oh, it's brought to you by Two Rivers Ford. You can custom order any new Ford from Two Rivers. They sell below MSRP on any non-specialty new Ford.
That's what they do. I forgot. Those are just great people over there. What in sports made you say, oh no, this week? Brandon says the officiating in the women's final on Sunday. Danny Ford also had some things to say about Jill Biden inviting both teams to the White House, the winner in LSU and the loser in Iowa State. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I saw that. Jill Biden inviting both LSU and Iowa. People making a big stink about it. Guys, it's a politician doing politician things, appealing to the LSU people and appealing to the Iowa people.
But it does not translate to the sports world. There are no participation trophies. Stop.
No.
Yeah, where does Hendon Hooker get drafted? Now, a lot of people are not feeling the first round. 57% say he will still be a second-round pick.
Interesting.
32% say he will be a first-round pick.
It's looking more and more like Hendon Hooker could sneak into the first round. Like you said, not top 5 the way Mike Tannenbaum has it mocked.
Bottom third.
Bottom third of the first round.
Yep. Just because there's going to be 4 fly off the boards early, and he is the next best guy after those 4.
Has it reached a point for you where you would be surprised if Hendon Hooker is still available after day 1 of the NFL draft?
Yeah. I would be. There was a time when I thought he'd be picked in the early 40s. But no, I think I would be surprised if he was still sitting there when we start coverage on night 2.
I'll say this: if it were to shake out the way Bruce Feldman has it mocked, Titans trading back in to the first round with that 20th pick, and then taking Levis and Hooker going 3 picks later, I bet there would be some riots in Nashville, especially from that Titans Vols part of the fan base.
Ooh.
Is UConn basketball in the same tier as Duke after last night? 68% say yes, 31% say no.
They can be a blue blood, but not be in the same tier as Duke, right? There's tiers within tiers.
Sure.
So they are a blue blood, unquestionably. 5 national championships. They're 5-0 in national championships in program history, 3 different coaches. But Duke's got 17 Final Fours. UConn's got 6.
Yeah, this is a developing picture here. Let's see how life after Coach K is for a few years, and I think we can answer this question better.
That's fair.
Which team can become a contender with a good 2023 draft? Vols Daddy 615 says Bears is the only answer. Kenneth says, is it too early to say the Panthers?
Yes, it is too early. They're not close enough yet.
There's no scenario to you.
The Bears are closer than the Panthers.
There's no scenario to you in which the Carolina Panthers are Super Bowl contenders in 2023.
I don't
will
believe
say
so.
That is going to be the worst division in football next year. So, I mean, there might be a chance they could make the playoffs, but I would not go so far as to name them contenders.
No. One of the Panthers, Saints, Bucks, or Falcons have to host a playoff game. It has to happen.
That's right.
Those are the polls.
Those are the polls, and that is the show. Rep Bryant, this is always fun. Appreciate you stepping in.
Thank you.
Last
Glad
moment.
to do it with old Buckaroo under the weather. But, this show was about like 5 minutes, man.
For Robert
it was
Walsh, appreciate you, Rep Bryant of Titans Radio, going back into his draft cave. We are 3 weeks out from the NFL draft. I'm Lucas Panzic. We'll be back at it tomorrow at 10 a.m. Blaine and Mickey coming up next on 104.5 The Zone.